Andrei Kuznicek is now free after spending more than 3 years in prison in Belarus. He's a journalist for the U.S. news outlet Radio Liberty. The State Department saying that the U.S. did not release any prisoners in exchange. All of this happening after President Trump takes calls with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, following that return of American Mark Fogel from Russia. Trump saying that Putin agreed to start negotiations immediately to end the war in Ukraine, and they've agreed to meet in person. Let's bring in our foreign correspondent, Patrick Reevell, also White House correspondent Selena Wang. So, Patrick, let's start with you and just the latest news regarding these releases, in particular the latest release.
Hi, Kira. Yeah, we're learning in dribs and drabs about who exactly has been released. It now appears at least 2 Americans have been released, as well as 2 Belarusians. One of these is Andrei Kuznicek, as you mentioned, the journalist for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the U.S. government funded news agency, and who was arrested and sentenced to 6 years in that very authoritarian country, Belarus. We also have learned that actually part of this deal saw an American Belarusian woman released 2 weeks ago in what is being described by U.S. officials as phase 1 of this deal. Her name is Anastasia Nufer, and she had been mysteriously detained in Belarus following mass protests there. Another American who apparently was released does not want to be made public, but clearly, I think this comes as part of this release that we saw yesterday with Mark Fogel by Russia, the English teacher who was released. And while the White House is saying that no one was given in exchange for these people now being released by Belarus, I think it's unlikely that it wasn't related to the Russian who was released, who we've learned just today, that basically the U.S. has released a Russian convicted cyber criminal named Alexander Vinnik, and he was released by the US in exchange for Mark Fogel. I think it's also quite likely that Belarus, which is closely allied with Vladimir Putin, has also agreed to release these people, likely to try and persuade the Americans to release someone like Vinnik, who is a convicted cybercriminal and who is believed to have ties to Russian intelligence. And so clearly that was a very significant release for the Russians, in that they are essentially receiving a major criminal in exchange for innocent people held both in Belarus and in Russia. But this is obviously great news for the families of these hostages who are being released, Kira.
Yes, it is. And Selena, tell us more about Trump's calls with Putin and Zelensky.
Yeah, well, first of all, this all marks a very significant shift when it comes to U.S.-Russia relations. We know that President Trump favors these direct leader-to-leader calls, so he had these back-to-back calls, first with Putin and then with Zelensky. We know the first call lasted for about an hour and a half, the second one for an hour. President Trump saying that he and Putin have agreed for their respective teams to immediately start negotiating for an end to the war in Ukraine. He also thanked Putin for the release of Mark Fogel. But as you just heard Patrick lay out, despite Trump saying last night that the U.S. didn't give up much in return for the release of Fogel, in fact, you had the exchange of an American teacher for a high-profile cyber criminal kingpin who had been accused of helping to facilitate the billions of dollars in exchange for criminal organizations, including drug traffickers and ransomware attackers. Now, all of this also comes as Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of Defense, just gave remarks today about NATO, and some of what he said was actually music to Putin's ears. He said the following. He said that we must start by recognizing that the return to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. He also said that the U.S. does not believe NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome. He also stressed that Europe needs to take control of the bulk of security for Europe. So all of this coming as the White House is saying that the release of Fogel is a positive, good step and good sign towards negotiating an end to the war in Ukraine, Kira.
All right, Selena Wang, Patrick Reevell, thank you.